Good afternoon to all of you. I would again like to welcome you to our second pre-application call for the fiscal year 2023 grants to enhance culturally specific services for victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking program, or CSSP for short. And that is my dog Stormy saying hi and good afternoon as well. I have been with OVW since 2017, and some of you may remember me from the transitional housing program, which is where I started. In 2021, I took over the CSSP, or Culturally Specific Services program, and have been working as an individual for the past 2 years to run this program. Recently, we had someone to join our team, Miss Olivia Dawson, and we also have Trisha Trice, who is on loan to us, and both of which have been wonderful, wonderful assets to the CSSP. So at this time, I am going to ask Olivia to introduce herself, and then Trisha will follow her and start with the first segment of our presentation.
Good afternoon. My name is Olivia Dawson, and I'm in my first month with the CSSP program. It's nice to meet you all. I'm coming to you from a small government agency called the U.S. African Development Foundation as a grants management specialist. There I managed a portfolio of grants related to community economic development and female entrepreneurship in both Uganda and Zimbabwe. I also have a background as a Peace Corps volunteer working on grants related to female empowerment and female leadership with Michelle Obama's Let Girls Learn initiative. Trisha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Olivia. Greetings, everyone, and happy Wednesday. I am Trisha Trice. I'm a member of the CSSP unit. I worked at OVW over 20 years ago, and I'm back on a detail and happy to be working with Veronica and Olivia. And it's been my pleasure to be here with you all today. So we have a lot to go cover today, and I'm going to try my best to go slowly. But welcome. So today we're going to go over several things: the language access and translation at a glance, an overview of the Office on Violence Against Women, an overview of the Culturally Specific Services Program, the federal award process, eligibility, application and submission information, how to apply, and application review. For the live pre-application calls, live captioning will be available in the following languages: Arabic, English, Simplified Chinese, Traditional Chinese, Korean, Hindi, Spanish. ASL is also available. If you would like a written transcript of this call, it will be available in English and Spanish. So at a glance, today's solicitation we'll be discussing, the grant number is O-OVW-2023-171500. The CFDA number is 16.16. The focus of this is any of the 4 crime areas: domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. The Just Grants closing date is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. Again, the Just Grants closing date for this solicitation is Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. The award period is 3 years, 36 months. The funding level, up to $400,000, up to $450,000 with an OVW purpose area. The registration, you must register in the System for Awards Management, which we call SAM, and grants.gov immediately, but no later than April 12, 2023. We'll go through the solicitation items that are most pertinent to completing your application package. We encourage you to follow through the solicitation with us as we discuss the various topics. It's extremely important that you read through the solicitation in its entirety, as this will help you to develop a very competitive application for funding under the CSSP program. Now let's get started. So a little bit about OVW. OVW is a component within the United States Department of Justice. The office was created in 1995. OVW administers grant programs authorized by the Violence Against Women Act and subsequent legislation, and provides national leadership on issues of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. OVW grants support coordinated community responses to hold offenders accountable and serve victims. About the Culturally Specific Services Program. This program is authorized by 34 USC Section 201124. The grants to enhance culturally specific services for victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking program, CSSP. Supports the maintenance and replication of existing successful community-based programs providing culturally specific services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, as well as the development of innovative cultural specific strategies to enhance access to services and resources for victims who face obstacles to using more traditional programs. 34 USC Section 20124B1. And as we're going through the presentation, you'll have opportunities to ask questions throughout. So at some point, I'm going to pause and then turn it over to Veronica, but you'll have opportunities to ask questions. The definition of CSP. Pursuant to 34 USC Section 12291A7, culturally specific services means community-based services that include culturally relevant and linguistically specific services and resources to culturally specific communities. Pursuant to 34 USC Section 12291A6, culturally specific services primarily directed towards racial and ethnic minority groups. As defined, those groups are defined as racial and ethnic minority groups as American Indians, including Alaska Natives, Eskimo and Aleut, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and other Pacific Islanders, Blacks, and Hispanics. Please keep in mind that even though culture includes language, language only may not address culture. So we're not looking for straight language programs, for example, translation, interpretation of mainstream services. However, what we are looking for are programs that are tailored to culture. So for example, sewing circles, gardening workshops, sweat lodges, sister circles. This program is an opportunity for you to propose what makes sense and what works in your community. We're seeking programs we're not seeking programs that simply propose mainstream approaches, individual and group counseling by licensed social workers and counselors. Those programs are not, this is allowable, but certainly not necessary. Please use this as an opportunity to tell us what works in your community. There's several things new with this program. So let's get started. The Violence Against Women Act, reauthorization of 2022, VAWA 22, revised the definition of victim services to include legal services. Applicants that support victim services will be allowed to include comprehensive legal assistance by an attorney. Comprehensive legal services may not be more than 10% of the project's overall budget. All legal services must be limited to a scope or focus that can be sufficiently addressed within the award period. VAWA 22 included a requirement that not less than 40% of available CSSP funds will be allocated to programs that meaningfully address non-intimate partner sexual assault. This includes adult survivors of sexual assault. The award period for CSSP is increased to 36 months. Projects that include an OVW priority area may be allowed an additional time period to expend these funds. Awards are up to $400,000. Projects that include an OVW priority area may receive additional funds that exceed this maximum award amount. There are 8 purpose areas for the CSSP program. Applicants must address at least one statutory purpose area. Choose one or more. You don't have to do them all. Let me say that again. You don't have to go do them all, but you have to select at least one. So let's go through all 8. The first purpose area, working with states and local government and social service agencies to develop and enhance effective strategies to provide culturally specific services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. 2, increasing communities' capacity to provide culturally specific resources and support for victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking crimes and their families. 3, strengthening criminal justice interventions by providing training for law enforcement, prosecution, courts, probation, and correctional facilities on culturally specific responses to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. 4, enhancing traditional services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking through the leadership of culturally specific programs offering services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. 5, working in cooperation with the community to develop education and prevention strategies, highlighting culturally specific issues and resources regarding victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. 6, providing culturally specific programs for children exposed to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Providing culturally specific resources and services that address the safety, economic, housing, and workplace needs of victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, including emergency assistance. Finally, 8, examining the dynamics of culture and its impact on victimization and healing. Applicants wishing to address purpose areas 6 or 8 must do so in conjunction with one of the other program purpose areas. Proposal focusing only on these 2 purpose areas will be removed. Again, applicants wishing to address purpose areas 6 or 8 must do so in conjunction with one of the other program areas. For additional resources, you can check out our website, the OVW grant page. There's information on the performance measures under the Measuring Effectiveness Initiative. There's also examples of successful projects in OVW's most recent report to Congress on effectiveness of VAWA grant programs. As I mentioned, there will be opportunities for questions. Thank you for your time, and I will now turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Veronica Smith.
Thank you, Tricia. Now let's talk about the OVW priority areas. As Tricia mentioned in the at a glance, there are 2 funding levels under the current solicitation. If you choose to address one or more of the 8 purpose areas, you can apply for up to $400,000, but these OVW or office-wide priority areas give you the opportunity to apply for up to $450,000. So in fiscal year 2023, OVW is interested in supporting the priority areas identified in our solicitation on page 7 for those that are following along. Applications proposing activities under any of these priority areas will be given special consideration during the review process, but will not receive extra points. OVW will determine whether an application sufficiently addresses a priority area that warrants special consideration. Not all applicants that state their intent to address a priority area will be favorably considered over other applicants. Meaningful responses to OVW's priority area should demonstrate authentic commitment to addressing the priority area or areas and should clearly show that the applicant has the capacity to effectively address the priority. So in 2023, the first OVW priority area is advance racial equity as an essential component of ending sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. In order to receive special consideration for addressing this priority, applicants must propose to address either or both Purpose Area 1 and or Purpose Area 3 and demonstrate that the applicant will enter into the required community partnerships. For information on how to document these partnerships, see the Letters of Commitment section of this solicitation. The second OVW priority area for fiscal year 2023 is to strengthen efforts to prevent and end sexual assault, including victim services and civil and criminal justice responses. In order to receive special consideration for addressing this priority, applicants must focus 50% or more of their grant-funded activities on non-intimate partner sexual assault. And this should be reflected in your budget. Applicants for this priority area may include an optional planning phase in their application. For additional requirements regarding this priority area, see the proposal narrative section of the solicitation. And the third OVW priority area for this year is to improve outreach services, civil and criminal justice responses, prevention and support for survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking from underserved communities, particularly LGBTQ and immigrant communities. In order to receive special consideration for addressing this priority, applicants must demonstrate the capacity to implement projects that will reach LGBTQ survivors within their culturally specific community. Applicants for this priority area may also include an optional planning phase in their applications. For additional requirements regarding this priority area, see the proposal narrative section of the solicitation. OVW does not fund activities that jeopardize, deter, or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims and allow offenders to escape responsibility for their actions. Applications that propose any such activities may receive a deduction in points during the review process or may be eliminated from consideration. Information on activities that compromise victim safety and recovery or undermine offender accountability may be found in the solicitation companion guide. And you may also find activities that compromise victim safety and recovery on pages 7 through 8 in the fiscal year 2023 solicitation. Out of scope activities. The activities listed below are out of the program scope and will not be supported by this program's funding. Applications that propose activities deemed to be substantially out of scope may receive a deduction in points during the review process or may be eliminated from consideration. First, research projects. Funds under this program may not be used to conduct research. Surveys and focus groups, depending on their design and purpose, may constitute research and therefore be out of scope. What is allowed is for organizations or programs to conduct internal evaluations of services provided to clients or of processes related to service provision. And so just to clarify that, when we are thinking about research projects, those typically are focused oftentimes on external data that organizations may be seeking to collect about the prevalence of one of those crimes in their community. And so typically those things are, again, out of scope for this program. But if you're looking to survey your clients or your program participants about their satisfaction with the services being offered, or even for things that they would like to see incorporated into service provision, those things are typically acceptable. Secondly, family violence is another out-of-scope activity. Grant funds may not be used to directly address child abuse or other family violence issues, such as violence perpetrated by a child against a parent against a child or another relative, and certainly not one sibling against another sibling. Thirdly, services for children are out of scope. Services can only be offered to children who are witnesses to or victims of violence if those services are provided in conjunction with services being provided to the child's parent or guardian who is a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Oftentimes, programs will include child care services while the adult primary victims are receiving their support groups or individual counseling. And again, those types of things are permitted with these grant funds. The issue is that the child cannot be the primary victim or the primary client that's being served by the organization. But again, they are able to receive tertiary services. Lastly, legal services are out of scope. Grant funds may not be used for criminal defense of victims charged with crimes, except for representation and post-conviction relief proceedings with respect to the conviction of a victim relating to or arising from domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Additionally, representation in tort cases is not allowed with these grant funds. At this point, we have given you all quite a bit of information about both OVW and the CSSP. So I am going to take a break just to see if we have any questions.
There is one question in the chat, and it says for OVW3, is that for LGBTQ plus or immigrant communities, or is it LGBTQ who are immigrants?
So it is for those at the intersection of one of those racial groups that Tricia identified under the statute for the CSSP. So they must fall into, and I'm going to go back to that slide, one of these racial groups, American Indians, including Alaska Natives, Eskimos, and Aleuts, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and other Pacific Islanders, Blacks and Hispanics, and then also identify as being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. So I believe your question was asking whether they need to be at that intersection of falling into one of those racial groups, as well as self-identifying as being LGBTQ plus.
Okay, and we're getting quite a few questions in the chat. So can funds support financial support for immigration services? So U visa / VAWA visas.
Yes, those things are allowable. The out of scope section focused on just certain things that you cannot do with these funds as it relates to legal services, but assisting individuals or clients with U visas, T visas, things like that is allowable.
Okay, and are there specific focus areas that emphasize delivery of services and programs tailored to culture?
Absolutely. So as Trisha identified, the 8 purpose areas that we have under the CSSP, you can look at which ones seem to fit closely to what you are doing. But if you're specifically looking at those services, you know, number 4 seems to pop out primarily. But, you know, again, with a lot of these, there's a way to be able to tailor them specifically or to tailor, you know, what you're doing in a way that falls under that purpose area. And remember that we are looking for you to really explain to us, you know, how your program and how your services meets that purpose area.
And the next one is, are immigration legal services specific to victims of violence and sexual assault allowed?
So it would depend on the scope of those services. And we'll talk a little bit more about the things that are allowable. Well, there's more specific information in the solicitation. We won't get into all of that specifically because of the time that we have today. But yes, there are some immigration services that are allowable with these funds.
Okay, and can the funds be used for preventative measures with children who are sensitive to sex trafficking and date rape?
Absolutely. That's one of the nice things about this program. Even though you can't serve children directly, you can do preventative type interventions and services that may focus on stalking or even promote healthy relationships. And so the CSSP is one of few programs that gives folks the opportunity to really engage in preventative services. We actually have some current grantees that do some wonderful work where they have developed partnerships with school systems to be able to do presentations for their entire student body populations, and also to use the school's resources in order to implement some of their program services as well. So we certainly encourage those of you who are interested in doing preventative services to do so.
Okay, and can you still use 10% of funds for legal assistance if you already have another OVW grant for legal assistance, such as LVAW?
You can. The goals under each program must be different. And so that means that you can't submit the same program to a different award source that you submit to the CSSP, but you can engage in similar services as long as, again, there are different goals or the target populations are different.
Okay, and will the grant allow financial support for victims of violence, such as help with rent, utilities, food?
Yes. Number 7 talks about that emergency assistance that's often useful to victims in the form that you mentioned. So yes, these funds can be used to provide those types of services.
Okay, and can this grant proposal include admin costs such as salary?
Absolutely. We recognize that it takes people to be able to provide services to victims and to clients and to survivors of one of these 4 crimes. And again, the nice thing about OVW and about the CSSP program is that we allow people to fully fund those advocates or administrators that are providing the day-to-day services under this award program. And so we have people that are employed 40 hours a week with these grant funds. So we don't have a cap on salaries, but it does need to make sense. It needs to be consistent with what is offered in your local area for a comparable individual who's providing services in that role.
Okay, and would this grant be able to provide trainings to African American and minority clergy and addressing domestic violence with victims, as well as prevention, education, and support services?
Absolutely. We have a couple of existing grantees who use this funds for that exact thing. And, purpose areas 1 and 3 talk about forming some of those relationships. But again, number 2, when we talk about increasing the community's capacity to provide culturally specific resources and support, can also be one of those purpose areas where you are training those in the community to be able to understand and to better serve and to interact with those from culturally specific groups.
And we have 3 more questions. So can advisory members also provide services to clients? Example, advisory member and receives payment to provide language translation.
So we would probably need to touch base with GFMD because some of those roles, of course, whether it's, being on the board of directors or being on an advisory board, it may be a conflict of interest to also be paid as a part of the staff. And so I would encourage you to, 1, look at your internal policies regarding things like that, but then you can also email us at the ovw.cultural email address with more specifics about your question, and we can engage with our grants financial management division.
Okay,
but you certainly want to consider, whether something like that is a conflict of interest.
Okay, and then if 10% of the project is allowed for legal services, then the program cannot fund an entire project directed at providing culturally specific legal services. Is that correct?
Correct, and that was a part of the reason that we put that cap on the legal services that you're able to provide with these funds, is because we really do want to see programs do more than just provide legal services, especially if you are serving clients that may be in need of other types of support because they're in a crisis or they just need more tools to be able to recover. And so we want those individuals to be able to get both those legal services as well as some type of supportive services to help them to heal.
Okay, and the last question, we have 2 more questions, but then we'll go on and save them for the next section. So can funds be used to assist with placing a person fleeing a domestic violence situation into a hotel for 2 weeks or more?
So yes, that will fall under the number 7, that purpose area when we talk about emergency assistance, because again, it sounds like you're looking to give them a short-term stay in a hotel, but then we also have some programs that do longer, even transitional housing with these funds as well. So again, it's up to you as the applicant to look at what makes sense for your budget as well as for the expertise of your staff in terms of primarily providing the emergency assistance versus a longer term housing option.
Okay, in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next section, but any other questions, I'll keep logging them and we'll go to the next round.
Well, thanks everybody. And we are doing our best to keep this moving along so that we can be respectful of your time. So thanks to Olivia and the others who are monitoring the chat for those questions. And again, we will take periodic stops or breaks in order to be able to respond. So next, we want to focus on the federal award information. Awards, amounts, and duration. The anticipated number of awards that we're looking to fund this year is 50. The period of performance start date will be October 1st of 2023. The anticipated total amount to be awarded under the fiscal year 2023 solicitation is $22,500,000. The anticipated maximum dollar amount of awards is between $400,000 and $450,000. And then lastly, the duration is 36 months or 3 years. The federal award information can be found in the fiscal year 2023 solicitation on page 9. I previously talked about the funding levels that we are offering this year. If your project or proposal is addressing one or more of the 8 CSSP purpose areas, you are able to apply for up to $400,000. If your project or proposal is addressing one or more of the 8 purpose areas as well as priority area 1, you're able to apply for up to $450,000. If your project or proposal is addressing one or more of the 8 purpose areas as well as priority 2, you are also able to apply for up to $450,000. And then lastly, if your project or proposal is addressing one or more of the 8 purpose areas as well as priority area 3, you are able to apply for up to $450,000. And remember, just because you identify that you would like to address one of these priority areas, you must ensure that you are meeting all of the criteria in the solicitation as it relates to that priority area. The types of applications that we fund under the CSSP are both new and continuation. New applicants are those that have never received funding under this program or their previous funding expired on or before April 18th of 2023. Continuation applicants are those that have an existing or recently closed award under this program after April 18th of 2023. Continuation funding is not guaranteed. If you would like more information about the types of applications that are funded under the CSSP, please consult solicitation page 10. This is additional information about the types of applications that are eligible under the CSSP program. Recipients of an fiscal year 2022 award under this program are not eligible to apply as the lead applicant or as a partner or subrecipient on a fiscal year 2023 proposal. Likewise, an organization that is a partner or subrecipient on a fiscal year 2022 award is not eligible to apply as the lead applicant or as a partner or subrecipient on a fiscal year 2023 proposal. Note, current grantees with a substantial amount of unobligated funds remaining, that means 50% or more of the previous award as of March 31st, 2023, without adequate justification, may not be considered for funding or may receive a reduced award amount if selected for funding in fiscal year 2022. I'm sorry, that should say fiscal year 2023. There are some mandatory program requirements for the CSSP. First of all, OVW sponsored training and technical assistance is mandatory. Secondly, OVW may conduct a program assessment or evaluation necessitating grantee involvement. Therefore, recipients may be expected to dedicate some OVW-funded time and resources to participating in an assessment or evaluation. For more information about these mandatory program requirements, you can review solicitation pages 10 through 11. Eligibility information. For those that are following along in the solicitation, the eligibility information is covered on pages 11 through 14. So who is eligible to apply? Private, nonprofit, tribal organizations for which the primary purpose of the organization is to provide culturally specific services to American Indians, including Alaska Natives, Eskimos, and Aleuts, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, Blacks or Hispanics in the United States or U.S. territories. Secondly, Native American tribal organizations other than federally recognized tribal governments. So that means Native American tribal organizations that are nonprofit and or community-based are eligible to apply. But if you are a federally recognized tribal government, you are not eligible to apply. Thirdly, nonprofits having a 501c3 status with the IRS other than institutions of higher education. Nonprofits that do not have a 501c3 status with the IRS other than institutions of higher education. This year, we included some examples in the solicitation to hopefully make it a little clearer, those who are eligible to apply. But this list is not exhaustive, and for additional information, please see the required partnership section of the solicitation. The first example is a faith-based organization or church providing culturally specific services focused on the needs of the Black community. Secondly, a culturally specific English as a second language or ESL program focused on the needs of the Hispanic community. A culturally specific health center that's focused on the needs of the Native Hawaiian community. And lastly, a culturally specific program that provides services focused on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking. And again, this list is not exhaustive. And so if you have a unique situation or don't find your program or project fitting neatly into some of the eligibility information in the solicitation, you are able to reach out to us again at the ovw.cultural@usdoj.gov email for more specific assistance with identifying or determining your eligibility. These examples are located on page 11 of the fiscal year 2023 solicitation. Some additional requirements for eligibility include: 1, the organization must have a board of directors or steering committee and staffing which is reflective of the culturally specific community it serves. Secondly, the organization must have demonstrated expertise in serving victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking, or have entered into a formal partnership with an organization having such experience. Just as a note, if the culturally specific program is one division within a larger organization with other areas of substantive work, for example, a division within a domestic violence organization that focuses on Black, Hispanic, or Latina victims, the organization is not eligible. For more information, see the eligibility information section of the solicitation. As we previously mentioned, one of the new aspects of our program for this year is that we are offering the opportunity for programs to broaden the scope of the legal assistance services that they provide under the CSSP. Pursuant to 34 USC section 12291B12, to be eligible for an award, any recipient or subrecipient providing legal assistance with funds awarded under this program must certify in writing that you meet the requirements outlined on pages 12 to 13 in the fiscal year 2023 CSSP solicitation. There are some sample certification letters that can be found on the OVW website. There are some required partnerships also to be noted under the CSSP. To ensure that projects supported by this program are implemented by eligible organizations with the required expertise, applicants must document their expertise and/or the expertise of their project partners. Applicants must submit either a memorandum of exemption, MOE, or a memorandum of understanding, MOU. For information on the required contents of the MOE and MOU, see the memoranda of understanding and other supportive documents in the solicitation. And later on in today's presentation, we will speak a little more in detail about the MOE and the MOU. You may reference the information about required partnerships on solicitation pages 13 through 14. All applicants must meet one of the following categories as it relates to the partnership requirements. Category 1, the applicant is a culturally specific organization and has a demonstrated history of providing services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking for a minimum of 3 years. The applicant must submit an MOU, and partnership is not required. And I want to emphasize, based on questions that we've had already, as well as in the past, that 3 years of minimal experience is for the organization and not necessarily for the individuals working in that organization. And that's because funding does not go to individuals, it goes to that organization. And so that organization has to have 3 years of providing those services in order to be exempt from partnership. Category 2, the applicant is a culturally specific organization with 3 years of demonstrated history of providing services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and will be partnering with another culturally specific organization that also has 3 years of demonstrated history of providing these services. An MOU is required, and there is no cap on the partner compensation. For category 3, the applicant is a culturally specific organization that has less than 3 years of demonstrated history of providing services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. The applicant will be partnering with another culturally specific organization that has that necessary 3 years of demonstrated history providing services. Again, a MOU is required for the category 3 partnership, but there is no cap on the partner compensation. For category 4 applicants, the applicant is a culturally specific organization, again, with less than 3 years of demonstrated history of providing services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and will be partnering with a victim services provider that has that 3 years of demonstrated history, but is not a culturally specific organization and therefore is not eligible to apply independently under the CSSP program. An MOU is required for category 4, and partner compensation is limited to $30,000 for the 3-year award period. And I do want to make a note that for these required partnership categories, the lead applicant must be located inside the proposed service area. Now, the partners can be community-based nonprofit organizations that are either inside or outside of the proposed service area. But again, that lead applicant must be located within the proposed service area. There is a limit on the number of applications. OVW will consider only 1 application per organization for the same service area. In addition, if an applicant submits multiple versions of the same application, OVW will only review the most recent system validated version submitted before the deadline. Information about the limit on the number of applications can be found on page 14 of the solicitation. Again, we will take a break here for a few more questions.
Okay, so our first question is, do we need to calculate salaries at percentage of time, or can legal services be paid for on a per case basis, i.e. $2,000 per case versus 15% of an attorney's time?
Again, it's what makes sense for your program. We don't have any requirements regarding that. If you have a legal person on your staff that you want to include under that personnel section, again, who's spending maybe up to 10% of their time focused on clients that are being served under this award, you can do that. But then some people do have those contractual relationships where they may have a certain amount based on, each client that is served. And so it's all about the structure of your program and really what makes sense.
Okay, and what level of accounting services is required to manage the grant funds?
So there is a pre-award risk assessment in the solicitation that gets a little bit more into the specifics of the accounting. Some people have in-house or, organizational personnel that focus on managing the accounting related to the award, or some people have a contractual service. And so, again, it's based on the structure of your organization as well as what makes sense with this program. You're also able to reach out to our grants financial management division if you have other more specific questions as it relates to that.
Okay, is there a limit on the time the legal services need to be resolved?
Yes, they must be resolved within the 3-year award period. And that's why we really discourage providing services that may end up being longer. Sometimes custody cases, or other legal services can go on, even in cases of divorce, it can go on for longer periods of time. So we really do encourage you as a program to consider the scope of legal services that you want to provide, because they do need to be accomplished by the time your award ends.
Okay, and this question is about legal aid funds. Does this need to be a staff member? Would a subcontract work? Or could we include this in a budget line item for client emergency funds?
Again, it would just depend on the structure of your program. From what it sounds like, these legal services are not necessarily something that could be covered, as an emergency. But again, you may want to contract with somebody who is available to clients, immediately or in those cases of emergency. Again, the grants financial management division typically determines whether that item would be under contractual area of your budget versus the personnel, but I typically have not seen it as part of emergency assistance. And those things, that are covered under emergency assistance do need to be itemized as well. And so if there are any concerns or further questions about that, again, our grants financial management division will raise those items.
Okay, and could you explain the difference between these two topic areas in the narrative? So purpose of proposal, 1, communities in the service area, and 2, culturally specific population to be addressed by this project.
So with those types of questions, we would prefer that you email us at that ovw.cultural email address, just because they may take a little longer, depending on what you are considering and proposing. I do know that yesterday we talked about the difference between those communities that are present in a particular service area near an organization versus those target populations that may be the focus of your program. And so that's one way of differentiating the two things that we're asking for in the proposal. But again, if there's more specific information that will help you to develop your application package, I think it would be easier and more efficient to email us at that ovw.cultural email address.
Okay, and is there an estimate for how many new versus continuation applications are estimated to be funded?
No, we don't have an estimate, and we don't, target any threshold or percentage of how many new versus continuation applicants that we'll fund. When we get more into the review process, we'll talk about what it is that we focus on when we determine the application that we'll fund. And so those things are more utilized in terms of us determining which applicants will be funded. Things like their peer review score, the programmatic review.
All right, and the next question is, can your CPA be licensed in a different state than the program is being funded in?
So again, those types of questions fall out of the programmatic scope, and you would need to address them to the OVW GFMD email address, because the Grants Financial Management Division covers things that are more specific or broader in terms of the types of financial services or even the requirements for CPAs that we as programmatic staff don't necessarily have the knowledge about. That email address is in the solicitation, but we can also provide it to you as well so that you can get that question answered by the Grants Financial Management Division.
And the next question is, if the applicant is a first-time applicant with no current OVW funding, how should we aim to meet the OVW training and technical assistance requirement?
So those things, the specific information about the training and technical assistance requirements, or what those things are specifically, will be shared once people become an applicant. So the solicitation just requires that you set aside, I believe it's $15,000 if you are in the continental US, and then $20,000 if you're outside of the continental US. So that is all that we are requiring at the time of application. If you are funded, you'll receive the specific information in terms of whether those things will be held in person or virtually and where they will be located. Typically, what we require under the CSSP is attendance at the new grantee orientation, which we often hold either in December or January. Of course, since COVID, it's been virtual, but we are looking to resume in-person conferences. And so, again, that specific information would be given to those who are awarded grant funds.
And so the next question is, if my current contract ends September 2023 and we are on track with expending awarded funds, are we eligible to apply?
Yes, you are eligible to apply as a continuation applicant.
Does the primary purpose have to be specified in the nonprofit's mission statement?
I believe you are asking if the primary purpose of your organization meeting our definition of being culturally specific has to be identified in the organization's mission statement. And if that is your question, it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. but the program or project that you are submitting under these awards, under these award funds should be identified as culturally specific. And again, it needs to meet the definition and the solicitation as it regards to one of those racial groups being the target, and then also identifying how your project or program is culturally specific. Now, as we identified before, you do need to explain, how the staff, as well as those on your board of directors or even the advisory board, is also reflective of your target group. Because again, those things help to demonstrate and to explain how the organization is culturally specific.
Okay, and the next question is, how can immigration legal services be provided if they need to be resolved within 3 years? All VAWA related legal services take more than 3 years.
So then again, as an applicant and as an organization, you need to decide whether it's realistic for your project to offer those services if you cannot complete them within the scope of this award period. And so if you can't do that, then maybe these funds or this grant source is not appropriate for your program.
Okay, and then 2 more questions. Can we provide mental health support with grant funds?
Absolutely.
Okay. And is there a minimum grant award amount?
So most of our awards are at that 400,000. Now OVW does have the discretion to provide a lesser amount based on the presence of some of those out of scope activities or activities that compromise victim safety. And so during the programmatic review, we will determine whether the application meets the requirements to receive the full 400,000 or 450,000, or whether we will use that discretionary ability to provide less funding. And so, yes, there can be a funding amount that's less than what we identified in the solicitation, and that minimum amount is usually, maybe 20,000 or so less.
Okay, and then we're done with the questions for this round. Thank you, Veronica.
And thank you for all of the wonderful questions that you all are asking. I'm sure that they will help you as well as others on this call to be able to develop a more competitive application package. So we are going to move forward here so that we can stay on track within our time frame. So the application and submission information, for those again who are following along with us in the solicitation, this information is on pages 14 through 16. The address to request an application package. The complete application package, this solicitation, including links to required forms, is also available on grants.gov and on the OVW website. Applicants wishing to request a paper copy of these materials should contact 202-307-6026 or ovw.cultural@usdoj.gov. The letter of intent. Applicants are strongly encouraged to submit a non-binding letter of intent to ovw.cultural@usdoj.gov by March 20th, 2023. Interested applicants that do not submit a letter of intent are still eligible to apply. So again, the LOI or the letter of intent is optional. For more information, see the application and submission information section of the solicitation. There are some formatting and technical requirements for your attachments that will be submitted as part of the application package. Your items should be double spaced. If you include charts, they can be single spaced. We ask that 8.5 by 11-inch pages are used with 1-inch margins. The type or font should not be smaller than 12 point Times New Roman or Arial font, except for footnotes, which may be in 10-point font. We also ask that you include page numbers. The proposal narrative should not be more than 20 pages unless you are addressing one of those optional OVW priority areas. In that case, you are allowed 2 additional pages per OVW priority area. Word documents should be in the following formats: Microsoft Word or a doc, PDF files or .pdf, or text documents .txt. Headings and subheadings are also encouraged as they relate to the sections of the proposal narrative and other areas of the proposal package that are contained in the solicitation. Those headings and subheadings are great ways to help you to be able to make sure that you are addressing all of the required areas in the proposal narrative, but it also helps the peer reviewers as well as the OVW staff that's doing the programmatic review to better be able to find and identify the information in your application package. So again, we really encourage people to use headings and subheadings. The information about formatting and technical requirements can be found on solicitation pages 15 through 16. Now we will get a little more in depth into the contents of the application. OVW will not contact applicants for missing items on the list below. Applicants that do not include all of the following documents will be considered substantially incomplete and will not be considered for funding: the proposal narrative, the budget detail worksheet and narrative, the memorandum of understanding or the memorandum of exemption based on those requirements in the required partnership section. Whether you are submitting an MOU or an MOE, it must be signed and currently dated on or after January 1st, 2023. And I will say that this is one of the most common errors that we see in application packages, where people do not sign and currently date their MOU or MOE. But these documents do attest to your experience as well as to the responsibilities that will be shared among partners. And so they do need to have a signature as well as a current date. And then lastly, if applicable, the letter of commitment that is required for purpose areas 1 and 3, as well as OVW priority 1, must also be signed and currently dated on or after January 1st, 2023. So these are the components of a complete application. This information is on solicitation, page 16. The proposal abstract must provide a short summary, no more than 2 pages, double-spaced, of the proposed project, including names of applicant and partners, project title, the purpose of the project, including goals and intended outcomes, primary activities for which funds are requested, who will benefit, including the geographic area to be served, and products and deliverables. The proposal abstract, which will be entered into a text box in Just Grants, is not scored, but it is used throughout the review process. For more information about the proposal abstract, you can reference page 17 of the solicitation. The data requested with application must also be complete and submitted as an attachment with your application package. The pre-award risk assessment and the summary data sheet are the two components of the data requested with application. These documents are not scored. The pre-award risk assessment. Each applicant must respond to each question. Do not submit responses from a prior fiscal year without updating them to be responsive to all questions listed in the questionnaire. Again, that pre-award risk assessment focuses on questions about your organization's financial infrastructure. And oftentimes, again, one of the common errors or mistakes we see is that people will submit information from a previous application and they won't necessarily address the current items that are being asked under that pre-award risk assessment, as well as the summary data sheet. So again, we encourage you to not simply submit information that you've entered in a prior year without comparing to make sure that your responses are current. The summary data sheet. The summary data sheet must be uploaded as an attachment in Just Grants and should be 1 to 4 pages in length, single or double spaced. The summary data sheet does not count toward the 20 page limit for the proposal or project narrative. And again, we often see individuals who will identify priorities from a previous application, and those may not be priorities under the current solicitation. So please, again, don't haphazardly submit information from a previous year. Please make sure that you are addressing the current questions in that summary data sheet. To give you a little more detail about the proposal narrative, applicants must upload the proposal narrative as an attachment in Just Grants. The proposal narrative may not exceed 20 double-spaced pages unless the applicant is addressing OVW priority area 2 and or priority area 3. We encourage people to really focus on being clear and succinct in your writing, because writing a lot doesn't necessarily mean that you are addressing the questions or that you are covering the required information that's in the solicitation. Oftentimes we will get proposals that are more than 20 pages, but the peer reviewers are instructed that they don't have to read more than 20 pages. So again, if you do include more than 20 pages, you want to make sure that the substantive information is included within those first 20 pages. Secondly, the proposal narrative must include the following 3 sections. The purpose of the proposal, which is worth 15 points. What will be done, which is worth 20 points. Who will implement the proposal? This is also worth 20 points. The total point value for the proposal narrative section is 55 points. For additional information, please see the proposal narrative section of the fiscal year 2023 solicitation, which is located on page 24. The budget worksheet and budget narrative. Applicants must complete the web-based budget form in Just Grants. Your budget must display a clear link between the specific project activities and the proposed budget items. Funds must be included to attend the OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance that I spoke about previously, which typically is the new grantee orientation as well as the CSSP Annual Institute. For those applicants located in the 48 contiguous states, $15,000 must be included in your budget. And for those applicants located in the US territories of Hawaii and Alaska, you are required to include $20,000. Now, we have seen people to submit budgets recently without including those travel funds because they assume that because of COVID, that travel has ceased and that they do not need to include those funds. But regardless of whether we are having the training and TTA in person or virtual, please follow the requirements of the solicitation. The grant award period is 36 months. Budgets must reflect 36 months of project activity. And lastly, the budget worksheet and budget narrative are worth a total of 25 points. So if you would like additional information, please reference the budget worksheet and budget narrative sections in the solicitation. And those are on pages 28 to 29. Another point I want to make about the budget is that OVW does not require matching funds. And so if you are applying, for example, for an award amount up to $400,000 from OVW, you don't need to get a matching amount from another organization. That's not something that we require. Also, please note that applicants are required to include funds in your budget for accommodations as well as language access. Applicants are required to allocate grant funds that support activities to help ensure that individuals with disabilities and deaf individuals and persons with limited English proficiency have meaningful and full access to their programs. Now, some organizations already have these things in place, so you can just describe to us what those services are. You can also provide the funding source that you have used in order to be able to ensure that those accommodations and that access is there for those clients that may need those things. But please make sure that if you do not have those things already in existence, that your budget does include funds to cover the access and language requirements. There are some costs that are unallowable with OVW funds. The costs associated with the following activities are unallowable and must not be included in the applicant's budgets: lobbying, fundraising, purchase of real property, physical modifications to buildings, including minor renovations such as painting or carpeting, as well as construction. Applications that contain these allowable costs may either receive a reduction in points or be removed from consideration. Food and beverage costs or cost for refreshments and meals is a topic that we often receive questions regarding. Generally, food and beverage costs are not allowable. Recipients must receive prior approval to use grant funds to provide a working meal and or refreshments at a meeting, conference, training, or other event. In the case of the culturally specific services program, because inherently the requirement is that you target immigrant groups or populations that may have food choices or preferences that are outside of the mainstream types of food that are typically offered. And so in those cases, you are able to provide refreshments and meals to clients who have special food or meal requirements or requests. Again, those are things that can be discussed with the OVW staff if you have a unique or specific question as it regards. But overall, food and beverage costs, especially for staff members or conferences, are not allowed. Information about the food and beverage costs or for refreshments and meals can be located on page 30 of the solicitation. So the letter of commitment, again, is required for those proposing to implement either Purpose Area 1 or Purpose Area 3, as well as Priority Area 1. There is more specific information about the LOC in the solicitation on page 32. But again, we'd like to remind you that the LOC must be signed and currently dated by the authorized representative of the appropriate state or local government, the social services, or the law enforcement agency with whom the applicant is partnering. In addition, the LOC is not the same as a letter of support. So oftentimes we will get people that submit letters of support as part of their application package. This is completely fine and allowable, but the letter of commitment has different requirements from a letter of support. So please make sure that if you are addressing Purpose Area 1 or 3, as well as Priority Area 1, that you are following those specific guidelines that are required for an LOC. So you've heard the MOU or the Memorandum of Understanding and the Memorandum of Exemption mentioned several times throughout today's presentation. Just to give you a little more information about these documents, the MOU is a document containing the terms of partnership and the roles and responsibilities between two or more parties. The MOU must be a single document. And we emphasize this because sometimes people will have more than one partner, and you should not have a separate MOU for each individual partner. The MOU has to be a single document. That means whether you have one partner or more than one partner, all individuals must be included in that one document, and those individuals must also sign that document. Category 1 applicants must submit an MOU and an MOE, in place of the MOU. The MOE must be signed and currently dated on or after January 1, 2023. Again, that MOU states that the applicant organization has that required 3 years of experience serving victims or survivors of dating violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. So please make sure that you are checking to ensure you have signed and currently dated the MOE. The total point value for the MOE and MOU is 20 points. You may reference solicitation pages 33 through 34 for more detailed information about the MOU and MOE. How to apply. All applications must be submitted electronically first in grants.gov and then in Just Grants. The two documents that you are to complete in grants.gov are the SF424 and SFLLL. Applicants that are unable to submit electronically must follow the instructions under OVW policy on late submissions. See submission dates and time on pages 36 to 37 of the fiscal year 2023 solicitation for a list of steps for registering with all required systems, as well as instructions for completing each step. OVW will not accept applications after the Just Grants deadline, except for severe inclement weather or natural or man-made disasters. For more information, see the OVW policy on late submission request due to severe inclement weather or natural or man-made disaster section of the solicitation. And that information, again, is on solicitation pages 36 through 37. To submit an application, all applicants must register online with the System for Award Management, or SAM, and with grants.gov. To ensure sufficient time to complete the registration process, applicants must register online with SAM and with grants.gov immediately, but no later than April 12, 2023. So again, we are encouraging people to do those registrations immediately if you intend to apply. Oftentimes when we get a flood of people seeking that registration at one time, that can delay you receiving that EIN that's required to access Just Grants. So please make sure that if you are even considering that you will apply for these award funds, that you go ahead and register with SAM and with grants.gov. So the application process has two steps. First, submission of the SF424 and the SFLLL in grants.gov, and submission of the full application, including attachments in the Just Grant system. You want to make sure that you are submitting that SF424 and the SFLLL as early as possible, but not later than 24 to 48 hours before the grants.gov deadline. Information about this two-step process can be found on page 37 of the solicitation. In the case that you have issues with SAM, grants.gov, or Just Grants registrations, please follow the contact information that is in the solicitation. Those of us who monitor that ovw.cultural email address don't have the ability to troubleshoot in any of those systems. So again, we encourage you to register and or confirm your existing registration at least 3 weeks prior to the application deadline to ensure that the individual who will be submitting the application has SAM, grants.gov, and Just Grants access, and is the person registered to submit on behalf of the applicant. In the case that you are requiring assistance, again, the information for the help desk is in the solicitation. And we encourage you, again, to do those things as early as possible. Please also maintain documentation of when registration began, as well as any issues related to registration and all communication with technical support. And we do want to emphasize that failure to begin the SAM, grants.gov, or Just Grants registration process in sufficient time is not an acceptable reason for late submission. The OVW policy on late submissions. Applications not submitted by 9 p.m. Eastern Time on April 18, 2023 will not be considered for funding unless the applicant receives OVW permission to submit a late application. In limited circumstances, OVW will approve a request to submit an application after the deadline. Approval of a late submission request is not an indication of the application's final disposition. So even though you may be allowed to submit that application after the deadline of April 18, 2023, it is still subject to the review process as well as the criteria that is described in the solicitation. And I mentioned earlier the application review information, so we will quickly cover that again. The review criteria. The proposal narrative is worth 55 points. The purpose of the proposal, 15 points. What will be done, 20 points. Who will implement the proposal, 20 points. Those three components make up the proposal narrative. The budget worksheet and budget narrative are worth 25 points. And then the MOU or MOE is worth 20 points. The review and selection process. We actually didn't talk about BMR during this presentation, but once April 18th comes and the deadline has been reached for allowing applications to be submitted, the OVW will complete what we call the basic minimum requirement review. And what we do during BMR is make sure that all of those components that are required as part of your application are included. That includes checking to make sure that that MOE or MOU is signed and currently dated. But also, again, making sure that the items that are required as part of a complete application packet have been submitted. Once we determine that the application meets those basic minimum requirements, it goes to peer review. OVW will subject all eligible, complete, and timely applications to a peer review process that is based on the criteria outlined in the solicitation. OVW may use internal reviewers, external reviewers, or a combination of both. Typically, what happens at peer review is that the peer review panel that is assigned to review the application will give those applications a score. The panelists will also provide feedback about why they remove points from certain sections of the proposal. And so the nice thing is that whether your application is funded or whether it's not funded, you are able to reach out to us to request that peer review feedback and information that can be used to help strengthen your application at a later date. So again, peer review is a great process to be able to help both OVW staff to make determinations regarding funding, but also applicants to be able to receive information about the strength of your application package. So once we get those scores from the peer reviewers, we will start at the top and begin the programmatic review. All applications that are considered for funding will be subject to a programmatic review. The programmatic review consists of assessing the application for compliance with the program's scope, activities that compromise victim safety, and if applicable, past performance, as well as priority area review. OVW reserves the right to deduct points from applications for the following reasons: the presence of activities that compromise victim safety and recovery and undermine offender accountability, we can deduct up to 25 points. Out of scope and unallowable activities, we can deduct up to 25 points. For past performance, we can deduct up to 25 points. And again, for those formatting and technical issues, we can deduct up to 5 points. Or for those formatting and technical requirements, we can deduct up to 5 points. Past performance. As part of the programmatic review process, applicants with current or recently closed OVW awards will be reviewed for past performance and risk. An applicant with considerable past performance issues may receive a deduction in points as described above, or be completely removed from consideration entirely, regardless of the peer review score. For those continuation applicants who may be required to have the past performance review completed, you can look at the criteria on solicitation, page 40. OVW anticipates that we will notify applicants of funding decisions by October 1st, 2023. And we often get people who will reach out to us to ask whether we have distributed those notifications. And prior to October 1st, 2023, we are not allowed to disclose that information. We have to provide the opportunity for grantees to be notified through the system. And then after October 1st, we are able to share that information. But again, that is the date that we anticipate notifying individuals. And so please don't get worried or nervous if you have not received notification of receiving funding prior to October 1st. And we are headed towards the end of this presentation. So this last section covers the federal award administration information. Contacts. For programmatic questions, contact this program at 202-307-6026 or at that ovw.cultural@usdoj.gov email address. And again, as programmatic staff, we have some general information about financial or budgetary issues or items that are required and allowed under this funding, but those more specific questions may be better directed to our Grants Financial Management Division. And those can be submitted at ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov, or you may contact them at 888-514-8556. This information is located on page 43 of the solicitation. For technical assistance with grants.gov, contact grants.gov applicant support at 800-518-4726 or support@grants.gov. Again, the programmatic staff does not have the ability to troubleshoot issues in SAM or grants.gov, so please make sure that you are using the contact information that is in the solicitation in order to be able to receive the appropriate technical assistance with Just Grants as well as SAM and grants.gov. For Just Grant support, you can call 866-655-4482 or you can submit questions or help or request for technical assistance at ovw.justgrantsupport@usdoj.gov. And then lastly, on pages 43 through 44 of the solicitation, there is an application checklist. We encourage you to use this checklist to ensure that you are submitting all of the required documents as part of a complete proposal package. Now, OVW may contact applicants for missing items, but this is not guaranteed. So please ensure that you are following that checklist. And it's also helpful to get a second or maybe even a third person within the organization to go through that checklist just to double and triple check to make sure that everything is included, as well as those items that require signatures and current dates meet the stated requirements in the solicitation. OVW will not redirect documents that are inadvertently submitted with the wrong application. For example, if you are seeking to apply to the rural program and you submit the application to the CSSP, we will not redirect those documents to the rural program. So please make sure that you are submitting the proper information and required documents to the program that you intend to seek funding. And we are at the end of our presentation for today. I believe we have time for a few more questions.
Hi, Veronica. So I just want to highlight that we did have a couple of questions in the chat, that most of which pertain to just grants, and Heidi has been answering them in the chat. So she mentioned that OVW is not using the web-based budget form this year in Just Grants. The budget is uploaded as an attachment in Just Grants, and so I wanted to highlight that. And Heidi's also included a link to the training in the chat, as well as a description concerning viewing documents and the difference between grants.gov and Just Grants. So those are the current questions we have now. If there's any others, feel free to raise your hand or write them in the chat.
And thanks so much again, Heidi, for you being a part of this presentation.
No problem. I just wanted to kind of reiterate that grants.gov is open right now for this solicitation, so you can submit your 424 and lobbying form now. There's no reason to wait. And make sure that you don't just fill out the forms, you've got to make sure that you submit them. That's a common error, that people fill them out and then they forget to actually hit submit. And then if you are running into any troubles on, the final day, the deadline in Just Grants, first, please try not to wait to the last minute. Don't wait to the final day. If you are working on it on the last day, certainly don't wait to the last hour. And certainly don't wait to the last few minutes. We a lot of times get calls right before the deadline. If you call with an hour or two left, we are 99% of the time able to assist you so that you can get your application in before the deadline. The times that people miss the deadline is when they wait too long to call for assistance. So just make sure that you call the OVW Just Grant Support and not the main Just Grant Support that is over at OJP. Make sure you call the one that is in the solicitation that's for OVW, and just don't wait till too late. Call early enough so that we have enough time to assist you so that you can make the deadline.
Okay, and I see a hand raised. You're welcome to unmute.
Hi, my name is Leslie Belt from California, and I'm inquiring about, there was something I vaguely heard it, but it's about a budget document and just grants. Is that different from how we would generally upload the budget information into just grants?
Hi, Leslie. This is Veronica. Last year, we were having folks utilize a web-based process for submitting their budget worksheet and budget narrative. But as Heidi just mentioned, this year we are returning to having you all to submit it as an attachment. So if, you know, the previous year under which you were funded, that's how you did it, we'll be doing that again this year.
Okay, perfect, perfect. I was like, wait a minute, let me just make sure. Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Are there any additional questions? I know that our interpreters are only with us for a certain amount of time. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat, or you can raise your hand now.
We have one question in the chat, which is, are there instructions for the format of the budget attachment?
Yes, everything that you need for your application package is in the solicitation. There are also examples on the OVW website. So please make sure that you consult the solicitation and then use those links in the solicitation for samples that may be on the OVW website, as well as any additional information that may be in that solicitation companion guide.
Okay, and we have two more questions. Who can I confirm with to ensure my information was accepted in grants.gov?
The information for grants.gov is in the solicitation. There should be a phone number as well as an email. So you can follow that contact information to be able to confirm.
You can also email the OVW Just Grants to confirm with us that we received your application from grants.gov.
And when will this recording, or will this recording be available for replay to go back and listen to?
I believe DMR said about 14 business days after today, after the recording.
What page are the links for the budget samples on in the solicitation?
Let me see if I have them on the slide. I may just have them in my notes. Okay. The pages in the solicitation that cover the budget are pages 28 to 29. And again, you know, if people do have some more specific questions regarding that budget worksheet and budget narrative, please don't hesitate to reach out to our Grants Financial Management Division. All right, if those are all of the questions, we do again want to thank all of the participants that attended this pre-application conference call, and we wish you the best of luck with your application packages. Please remember that we are available to assist you throughout this process. And I also want to make you all aware that the Culturally Specific Services Program does have a technical assistance provider that helps those that have never applied for federal grant funding to be able to develop capacity to do so. And if you would like that information, please reach out to us at the ovw.cultural email address, and we can put you in touch with that TA provider, Caminar Latino, as they offer additional webinars as well as support and assistance for those, again, who have never applied for federal funding and who are seeking to apply for an award under the CSSP. We really appreciate you all taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. And we wish you a wonderful evening. And again, a seamless application process. Thank you and have a good day.